as promised, here we are, much deeper into the bog in Caithness, having just got the train from Forsinard, which is 10 minutes down the line that way, and I've arrived at Altnabreac, which is one of the most remote stations on the network, request only, one of the least used by all accounts, and it's quite a shock, it's quite a surprise actually to get off somewhere so remote, because on the train ride in here it was just bog and plantations whizzing past, and it just feels like the ends of the earth, like I was saying in the last one. So it's quite strange to sort of get off and find that you're surrounded by quite a few houses here. Like this one is a school. Well, it was an old school. I think I was reading up on it. Apparently, it closed in 1986. So there's clearly, enough kids around in these parts, presumably, to keep it open until then. Anyway, off for a walk in the wilds of Caithness. Well, this gives a sense of where you can head out from here. So it's saying I can go to Loch, which is 6.25 miles that way, down the Willen, 4 miles that way, Forsinard, which is where we're going, 10 miles that way. There's more sort of markers and indications of civilization here than I was expecting, even though I knew there were buildings here. This is called the Highland Access Project, so this is to develop all these as trails. They are popular cycling trails. So there's not going to be any massive vistas. Well, actually, that's not true, because when the moorland undulates and you get onto a higher point, there is a massive sense of space. There's not going to be any big crags, towering mountains, raging rivers, steep gorges. There's nothing like that. Predominantly it's going to be moss, bog and plantations, which I'll say more about in a bit. My original plan today was what I did actually, I opened up the map of this part of the world and I just looked for any little pimples on the landscape, and I thought, because you don't need much height in this part of the world to get up and get an amazing sense of the view and the space and see for a very long way, all the way to Orkney in fact you can. So I found this hill called Benvironment, which is a few miles this way. This track goes to down the Willen Lodge, which is now derelict and isn't occupied anymore, but there used to be a bridge there, and it's marked on OS maps as there still being a bridge on some OS maps, and doing some digging last night it was apparent that it's long gone. So my plan had been to go over the bridge, go up Benvironment, and then come down here and get the last train back, which would have been about 5 o'clock, and with all the traumas of wondering whether A, there'd be a train, and B, if there was a train, whether it would stop, whether it would see you, because it's a long walk out, or a cold night on a platform if you don't. Well, all you can see is me through the reflection, but there's not really anything in there. It's all locked up, all derelict. I think a lot of these buildings date from the late 19th century, from all the sporting lodges, I'm assuming. Oh, look at this. It's like time stood still. Half over there, things were cooking on. Ooh. So yes, my plans thwarted. Very disappointed actually. I was looking forward to getting up quite high, this far into the bog, because it is. And the hill that I'd picked, I think it's about 300 and something meters high, but its prominence is only about 90 meters. But it's enough to give it a massive view. It's so isolated. It would have been amazing, but one for another day maybe. I don't mind paddling through rivers, but maybe not this time of year. Anyway, so what I'm going to do, I'm just walking down here just to go and get a look at Loch Hotel, which is no longer a hotel, but it's a very grand, old, imposing building that You just wouldn't believe it was here amongst all these trees. And then I'm going to double back to those signs, those finger posts, and then walk the 10 miles back to Forsinard, which is where you join the main road again, and then walk, I think it's about 3 or 4 miles south along the main road back to Forsinard, which is where I've parked and where I got the train this morning. So it's going to be a day of walking on tracks like this for the most part. You can now cycle for miles in this part of the world, in some of the most remote parts of the country, some of the oddest and most imposing landscapes in the country. Great for cycling. So I dare say this is crisscrossed by cyclists in the summer. Today though, I'm not sure whether I'm actually going to encounter anybody. Remote as it is, there are people out here. I mean, even when I got off the train, the first thing you can hear is the of a diesel generator for the house on the platform, and 3 dogs came running out. Somebody stuck their head out the door. So remote as it is, there are people here, and there are lodges, hunting lodges, derelict and still being used further deep into here, and farmsteads and things like that. So there's folk going on, plus the forestry. And I'm just coming into view, and it maintains a looming presence everywhere in this part of the world. There it is, that's the top of Morven, just popping up over there. Well, there you go. How's that for something peculiar just appearing from around the corner out of nowhere? It's like, I don't know, it's like some evil genius's lair or something, isn't it? It's like a Bond villain should be out here. It's like something out of Skyfall, isn't it? It was, I think it was built in 1895 as a lodge, and it was called Loch Hotel on the maps because it was, I believe, used as a hotel in sort of mid-20th century. But it's back into private use again now. I wholeheartedly approve of this. All the way out here, being self-sufficient, small-scale stuff. Beautiful spot. Lovely. It's as far as I'm going. I mean, originally my plan was to go further up, all the way up here, and break out of this forest and go onto those hills. I think that's it, actually. I think that's it. So we would have broken out the forest and then got nice views of the moors. But as it is, it's as far as we go on this stretch. It would be nice to explore a bit more and take my time, but it is January and there is not much light. And it's now 11:25, so I did intend to be walking away from Altnabreac by 11:30 because it's going to be a few hours to get back to the road. Not that it matters. I mean, navigating in darkness with a head torch on these sort of tracks isn't a problem. It's quite straightforward. But I want the views, and it's nice to be back in good time for dinner and a beer. It's just the most beautiful weather out here. Completely different to what it was like back at Forsinard. There was snow. I was coming in on the train. It was snowing quite heavily actually out of Forsinard, and so for a moment it looked like it could be quite an unpleasant trudge over the moors, but it's clearly it's a different matter out here. The way of it is though in Caithness, it gets when you get the southwesterly winds, a lot of the precipitation gets dumped in the Wester Ross and on the far sort of west and south of Sutherland, and this little corner of the country can actually be surprisingly dry and sunny. That's clearly the way it is today with this blue sky. It's lovely. I'm getting a bit hot. I'm going to have to stop and this isn't what I expected. I'm going to have to derobe a bit. Alright, that's better. I feel much more comfortable now. I dare say once you get out of these forests, out of these plantations, which are affording quite a bit of shelter just now, it will be a different matter entirely. But we'll see. I'm enjoying it for now. Sunshine, calmness, warmth in January in Caithness. Oh, here we are again, an hour later. Only this time we're going left. funny, even though you know there's nothing coming. These things always make me nervous. There's nothing coming. Even out here, you know, it's so infrequent, but it always makes me nervous walking over a railway, and rightly so, I suppose. Right, that's us leaving Altnabreac. 10 miles from here. It's funny, isn't it? You wonder what on earth folk do out here. You know, when someone stuck their head out of the house over by the station, I had half an inclination to say, what? To ask. But it's a bit rude, isn't it? Sort of asking someone, excuse me, what do you do? Why are you here? It's interesting. I'd like to know why folk all the way out here. It's actually quite difficult to find information about even why the station is here. Lots of people have written about it saying that exact thing. It's hard to find anything about it. The only thing I could find was that it said it used to be, it sort of grew up as being a passing place on the line, and it had a water tower, which is still there. Apparently that was perhaps justification in itself and being a passing place, I don't know. But on the other hand, it seems extraordinary that there's, you know, that the railway comes through here anyway. And I don't know if it's true, but I did read somewhere that the reason it comes inland, someone can tell me whether this is true or not, is because it avoids them having to go up over the Berrydale Braes, which if you've driven up the A9, you'll be all too aware that after Helmsdale, going north and you get to Berrydale, the road plunges down this very steep, almost like a ravine, I suppose. And the cost of engineering works was going to be so astronomical it was decided against it and to plough it inland. And it comes a long way inland, and it comes over all this bog. And so other towns further up the coast, like Leicester and other ones, were left without stations for a long time before they were built south from Wick. I don't know if that's true. Sounds plausible, but it's a massive detour for the sake of avoiding a bridge. And finally, happily, we're emerging from at least this plantation. It's not the only one. I don't much like being cooped up in plantation. I don't mind, you know, a bit of woodland, native woodland, established woodland, mature woodland, with lots of light. That's a different matter. But plantation, yeah, it's a bit claustrophobic, monotonous. So it's nice to finally get a bit of a view outwards across bog. See, this is more like it. This is essentially the landscape we're walking through. This massive expanse of blanket bog. Very inhospitable. Just an absolute nightmare to walk through if you tried. But again, like I was saying yesterday, the sense of space, it's unlike anywhere else. And those are the Ben Grahams. On the left is Ben Graham Moor, which I did yesterday, and on the right is Ben Graham Beg. Forsinard is way over there. It's sort of probably another 8 miles or so along this track, and it is a track like this all the way out. So really nice walking. Well, if you haven't got knackered feet like me anyway. Good for cycling. You can see it's quite sandy, so you can pick up the sand and be a bit squelchy if it's been wet. But if you get it on a sort of I think winter's a good time for it. It gets a bit frosty, it gets a bit hard. You just glide over the top. It's wonderful. Oh no, see these, which very handily say out, and for good reason. When you're at a junction, as we are now, if you took the wrong one, I mean, I don't think you're going to get lost necessarily, but a lot of them are just dead ends, but they're going for a couple of 2 or 3 kilometres before they stop. So it's a lot of backtracking if you do take the wrong way. So handily, most of these junctions that I can remember, there's these out signs pointing outwards, pointing the way back to Forsinard. It's quite something though, eh? This whole country up here, in most of southern and Caithness, you might have heard it referred to as flow country. And that's it derives itself from an old Norse word, I think, for wet or boggy place, which is, in many senses, is an understatement in this part of the world. And it's essentially a blanket bog. And when people say flow country, you think of blanket bog, which is what this is. And there's 200,000 hectares of it up here in flow country. 400,000, at least twice that, in this sort of corner of the north. And is it the biggest? It's certainly one of the largest areas of this sort of blanket bog in the world. It's certainly the biggest in Europe, I think. Is there more in Scandinavia? I don't know. You always hear it referred to as being the biggest in Europe, biggest blanket bog in Europe. Blanket bog essentially is peat, which you can see here, all this stuff, this black, generally a few meters deep. But in places on the blanket bog and flow country, it can be as much as 10 metres deep, the peat. 20% of Scotland is actually covered in peat. Peat, of course, is enormously important in storing carbon. You know how blanket bog forms. It forms in very wet places, generally upland places, gently sloping, flat land, stuff like this, really. Because the vegetation is very waterlogged, very acidic, and there's no decomposition. Bacteria can't decompose stuff, so all the mosses and stuff that grow on bogs, they die, they don't decompose. It just adds up, and it accumulates over time, and it forms this carpet, this blanket of bog. It's different to what we get in the lowlands. You know, if you get in parts of the central belt, you get lowland raised bogs, which is the same kind of principle but slightly different in that they tend to form in indentations in the landscape, in maybe where you've had lochs, little ponds, depressions, very wet places, and again all that vegetation, all that moss accumulates, but the surrounding land's usually much drier, so what you end up with is like a dome of peat and of mosses on top, lowland raised bogs, and they're very marked, so you can see them as domes, and there's a lot of them, or there used to be a lot of them. There's a lot of stand in the central belt and places like that. But blanket bog is much, much larger. It covers an enormous part of the country. But because it doesn't rot, all this plants, all this moss, because it doesn't rot, all this vegetation locked up, it holds an enormous amount of carbon. I mean, peat is the precursor to coal. If you give it many millions more years, lots of heat and compression, you get coal. So yeah, really carbon heavy. And the blanket bog up here in southern Caithness holds almost 3 times the amount of all the woodland, all the carbon in all the woodland in the UK put together. I mean, it's just remarkable. And peatlands they hold a lot more carbon than the rainforests do. 3% of the Earth's surface is covered in peat, but it accounts for 30%, a third almost, of all terrestrial carbon on the planet. All the carbon in Scotland's peat bogs, if it was all released at once, it would be the equivalent of at least a century's worth of all our fossil fuel emissions at current rates in Scotland. So peatlands are a really important part of our fight against climate change. And here it is. I'm sure most of you must have seen it before. Most people in Scotland will be familiar with peat, of course, but this is it. It's essentially this fibrous, I mean, it smells earthy, and when it burns, of course, it's got a really, really nice smell. So up in the Western Isles and places like that, parts of the Highlands where there's not really any trees, anything to burn, this stuff burns really well. So this still uses a fuel in some places. But yeah, I mean, it's really dry just now, but it can hold up. It can hold a lot of water. Very, very squelchy stuff. And it's made up, of course, this is, I say it's moss, it's sphagnum mosses, which is in here, this sort of stuff. See how wet that is? Incredible stuff. It can hold about 20 times its weight in water, When you squeeze it famously, it just keeps giving because there's so much water stored in this stuff. There's over 30 different species of sphagnum, a lot of them found here, and it's this, essentially this is what turns into peat. It's amazing. Now, the curious thing of course about this part of the world is peat's getting a lot of attention these days, with lots of restoration projects on the landscape scale and also locally. And so it's been recognised now just how important somewhere like this is, and how important it is to be intact and performing its function of soaking up carbon from the atmosphere. Which makes it so curious that there's so many plantations here, so many trees. Because trees of course will dry bogs out and inhibit their function and take up water, and they can dry them out, quite substantially. So the question, why are all these trees here? I've just stopped for a moment just because how is that for silence? There was quite a keen wind over there, but if I just shut up for a moment. See, I didn't expect it to be like that anywhere on this route because of the keen wind, but this is the sort of experience I was hoping for coming out here. This sort of track, this sort of walking isn't my preference at all. The way my feet are, if I'm walking on hard stuff like this, I'll feel it by the time I finish. I'll feel this evening and tomorrow. I'd much rather be on rough ground, where this sort of stuff, I can walk all day on this. Your feet land in a different way every single time, and it doesn't. The impact is spread around, all along your foot. But this is quite unpleasant for me to walk on. But the benefits, far outweigh any discomfort like that. Just this massive, massive place. There's no one here. Massive skies. Tweeting of birds. In the summer, this place is alive with all kinds of things. Solitude. Peace and quiet. Quite a few people who I've seen writing up their experience of walking this. A lot of them have said they've come up here specifically to get away from stuff, hectic work lives and things. They get the train in and walk out, or they walk out and get the train back, and everyone just feels this connection with something else, I suppose. Whatever it is you're looking for, but this is so nice. I could just sit down here for hours. The light's going to go soon, so I can't, but it's wonderful. It's just wonderful being out here, regardless of how horrible this track is to walk on. What an amazing place. Anyway, trees. There were people could get woodland grants and offset them against their income tax in the 70s and 80s. And a lot of these woodlands were planted through that, and there was famously some very well-known celebrities used it as a way to, reduce their tax burden. So who are the ones? Terry Wogan famously, Alex Higgins, Hurricane Higgins, Nick Faldo, all these 80s names. Who else? Cliff Richard, I think, as well. Also all these forests were put in, and not all of them. It's on bog, so not all of them actually got to the point where they were going to be worthwhile timber, and it was eventually put a stop to. I can't remember who it was that put a stop to it, about 30 years ago, recognising what the damage was to this amazing place, and it was put a stop to. But the damage is done. It's funny, you sort of say, the focus now on planting trees. Everyone wants to plant trees, we're going to plant 10 million, 20 million, 100 million trees per year, every second, every week. Plant trees. And it's great for soaking up carbon, but this sort of place is more valuable as a carbon sink without the trees on it, I suppose. And so it's a case of Trees, yes, absolutely. Let's go mad planting trees and letting forests regenerate, like at my lodge. But the right trees in the right place, or even no trees, somewhere like this. So where we are now is on, we saw it, I came through the gate not that long ago actually, way back there, came through a gate that said entering RSPB Forsinard Flows, which is the nature reserve here. And after the RSPB bought this place, they've set about, and they're still doing it, a massive program to remove the plantations. It's a massive undertaking. It's been going on for decades now. And I don't know how many of these are going to go. I don't know if they're just going to let them reach, you know, crop size and then take them, you know, let them get to their required height and then take them. Or whether it's just getting rid of them, whatever, I don't know. But certainly a lot of them have been cleared. So we came just to the edge of those trees, we came up through here, but you can see the old lines where there used to be rows of trees in all here. So this was once plantation, not that long ago. And when you go out onto the bog, onto those sort of places, you'll find rows and rows of these bleached white skeletal trees, where some of the trees get, I mean, a lot of it gets, if it can be sold, it's sold. Any sort of worthwhile timber is sold. Other ones are sold for pulp, I think, biomass, stuff like that. The rest of it is brashed and mulched, and if it can be removed, it is. Other than that, a lot of it is left in situ. They try not to leave too much, I believe, because it adds too much nutrients, but some are just left in. It's easier sometimes. Certainly back in the day, it was easier to leave them on, just leave them where they were, and then they'd be absorbed by the bog over time. But a lot of it is used to refill drainage ditches that were dug during the times of forestry, which just dries out the peat. So a whole big process of restoration is on its way here, and it's impressive. It's surreal, isn't it? This waterscape, almost like moonscape. There's just nothing here. It's incredible. Just, I know I keep saying it, but you know, I don't know anywhere else in Scotland that feels like this. There's parts of Lewis and Harris, I suppose, not quite like this. I've got rid of my jacket again because I'm getting quite warm. I'm sure it isn't, it must be about 3 degrees or something. The last time I was walking anywhere around here was 9 years ago, and I was finishing off the countryside management, HNC or D, can't remember which, and you had to do some volunteering. I came up here to Forsinard Flows and did a couple of weeks helping around the place, and I've never ever felt cold like that. It was a proper northerly, you know, the northerlies that you feel in the north first, the first place that the Arctic air comes ashore. And I think that is the coldest I've ever been at a low level, because it's not that high here, a couple of 100 meters. Never felt that cold. It was so cold, it was insane. Bitingly cold. I mean, and that was when I first, I suppose, came here actually and saw this place for the first time. We were going and measuring the water, the groundwater, sort of, you know, there's tubes in places where the forest has been felled. I seem to remember there were tubes that you measured groundwater, so you went in and sort of measured how far up the groundwater was coming to see if the peatland was recovering, that sort of thing. So traipsing over all this sort of stuff, it's hard going. At least it was all frozen. And there is ever-present Morven over there. Always looms over everything in this part of the world. And you can see it all the way from Murray actually as well. You can see it from the top of Ben Macdui. gets mistaken for something else. I think I said before, I was on top of Benvironment on an incredibly clear day, and you could see that from Benvironment, the Cairngorms, like a pyramid. And there was a lady going, "Oh look, there's Schiehallion." I know you can see Schiehallion from everywhere, but you know, completely the wrong direction. This bit around here actually is a good indication of how the landscape changes so drastically over time. My map that I've got, it's not that old, but it does have forest as being, it's got this one marked as forest in here. Some of it was, I can see, certainly over there that used to be, but so it's nice. I mean, when you looked on the map coming through here, I was trying to identify how much of the walk I would be spending on the open moor in this wonderful sort of, with the vistas, the big skies, and it didn't seem like there'd be a huge amount. It was intermittent coming out, and I'm just really pleased to find that that's not the way it is. It's actually, I need to update my map and have one that hasn't got the forestry on it, because there's nothing. It's just open space, even all the way out here. Bernard Matthews Turkey Feast, even all the way out here in the middle of nowhere. To be fair, that's the only thing I've found, apart from all the usual stuff you see, fencing and stuff. But apart from that, this is the only thing I've found just now. I'll put that in my bag. Well, I could just hear the train all the way over there. That's the only means of crossing this landscape, really, that doesn't involve massive hikes. It's extraordinary, really. Incredible to see one of those tiny little commuter trains ploughing its way through a landscape as vast and immense as this one. I am faffing endlessly with stopping and marvelling at these vistas, talking to you, that it's now 20 to 2, so it's about 3 hours left of daylight, so it's plenty to get to the road, but the rate I'm going, it's going to take me all day. Sense of solitude, space, and just a quality of light just now as we're getting into the end of the day. It's restorative, whatever that word is. Though the hills be brown and have no snow on them whatsoever, this just lifts my soul. I mean, it gives me such joy that places like this still exist. There's still this much open space, pretty much. I mean, yeah, it's had things done to it and it has to be managed, but you know, to know that there's this amount of open space left still, it just gives me so much joy. Really, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I get quite moved by it, just how there's so much nothingness here. And it's beautiful today. But you could be here tomorrow, or you know, in a couple of weeks' time, when maybe it probably will be snowing in a blizzard. It's brutally cold here. It's a brutal place, but you know, now just look at this. It's wonderful. I really should stop faffing. The route goes around this hill. I think it's called, is it Slethill Hill or something? It comes around that, and then sort of goes off that way and comes out on the road quite a few miles north of Forsinard. Unfortunately, Forsinard itself is actually more over here, but that's fine. I'm getting a nice light now. Oh, it's wonderful. Well, I can't really think of much of a better place for coffee and cake as this. Cheers. It's funny because I really feared the worst in terms of the weather. I've got thermals on, down jacket is in my bag. You know, I thought it's not the place you want to get caught short. It's unbelievable. It's so still, and it's warm in the sun. It won't be once it goes down. It's funny, I said quite a few times before about how, you know, back in the day I wouldn't have come anywhere near somewhere like this because it didn't have hills. I mean, there are hills here to climb. You can see them pointy as anything over there. And over there, certainly wouldn't have walked through somewhere like this just for the sake of walking through somewhere like this. I would never have done that. Always had to be about the hills. But this is wilder than, and more impressive in a way than a lot of hills are. It's magnificent. Right, it's 2:15, stop faffing. Okay, on we go. Just found that. Just went up this little rise to get a view of the loch, and that was there. I mean, why? Fuck's sake. I can't believe it was snowing earlier on when I left Forsinard. I'm sweating now. There's a lot of deer prints all along these paths, and it's been like that the whole way along, but I haven't seen a single one. And there's not much wildlife to hear. Some meadow pipits chirping away. I saw a buzzard over by Altnabreac, but lots of crossbills actually over by Altnabreac, by Loch Lodge. The sound was predominantly crossbills, which isn't surprising really. All these conifers everywhere. Anyway, 2:45. It's about another 5 kilometres maybe to the road from here. I'm just gradually gaining height now, and then it'll be downhill through the plantation back to the road. Well, there's something I've not seen much of this winter. Icicles. Still clinging on, so it must be fairly cold out here. Get no sense when the sun's on you just how cold it is. I mean, that's still, all that peat is all iced up, but I'm still quite toasty. Actually, there's me saying I haven't seen any deer, but there we go. All the way at the top of the hill. So there you go. That's where they all are. I say we in inverted commas. The wee hill, which isn't that much of an ascent to be honest, but I had thought maybe when I went past, because the path swings around it fairly high, about 500 metres from the top. I did think maybe on the way back I could nip up because it would give you a brilliant all-around view of what's around here, but I think we've had a really good taste and I've still got quite a long way to walk, so I don't think I'll bother. Well, it's not much of an incline, but after miles and miles and miles of pretty much complete flatness, I quite feel that in my legs. It never seems to end. It can be a good thing and a bad thing. I'm really enjoying myself, and the light's amazing. But it's not my favourite surface, that's for sure. But just before we crest the hill, just one last look back, because we'll lose the view back the way now. One last look at this massive expanse, looking back at where we've come, which is somewhere over there. It's hard to tell. It all looks pretty uniform, it all looks quite similar. It's hard to really tell where you've come from. The only reference point you have is the hills over there, Caithness Hills, Morven, and of course Graham Begg's over there, Ben Graham Begg and Ben Graham Moor. But we've come from over that way somewhere. Probably about 9 miles so far. Not far, but it feels a long way. I remember, and I said on the Sandwood Bay blog about how some of the write-ups of the walk into Sandwood Bay from, what is it, Blair something, isn't it, up there? I forget. It's been that long since I've been up there. You know, up near Kinlochbervie, up that way. some people, the write-up saying that it'll put some people off because it's so relentlessly bleak, just moorland, and that's only like 3 miles or something. But you can see why. You can see why it does. I mean, this is a beautiful, rather benign day, but you can imagine how some people would be quite freaked out by it. One of the most sparsely populated parts of the country. You can imagine picking somebody up from the southeast of England and plonking them down here if they've never actually been out up here before. I think people are surprised that there's this much nothing, this much space up here. I think people are surprised that we've got this much space up here. As with yesterday up on Benvironment, sun's just about to go, it's just about to disappear behind a cloud. The little window of blue sky over there is going to disappear. Just enjoying this light. I mean, look at this. I just can't go over it. I hope that on video, I hope that on film, you know, the sense of scale of this place, I hope, and I keep saying it, repeating it ad nauseum, but I just hope it, you know, it conveys on screen just what a massive place this is, and how humbling it is standing here looking at, you know, views like this with this light, this beautiful winter light. It's going to get really cold in a bit when that sun goes down, so I think it's time to press on. I think yes, time to go. Ooh, look. There we are. Hello. Ah, beautiful eye. There we go. Oh, that's nice to see. As I said, I hadn't really seen any today. For the first time, getting a view the other side, and looking pretty impressive actually. That's Ben Loyal. Much better view of it than yesterday from Benvironment actually. It's a bit clearer today. But there's definitely lots of snow in the distance over on those hills over there. It's like Cranstacky and those ones over there. But sadly, as has been the story all winter, heavy snowfall for 2 days and then it's going to go. It's going to get mild again. It's going to be 10 degrees here apparently by the end of the week, which is a shame. Just yo-yoing around, but never in the right direction. Well, just about to start descent into the forest and we're going to lose the views. Forsinard is, where are you? That's it, just nestling in there. So it's all the way over there. Unfortunately, join the road just down here. You know, it feels, in my head, it feels like getting down to the road, getting off this track feels like a win, and feels like, oh, that's it, done, but no. There's still a bit of a hike along the road. Might try and hitch, maybe. See if anyone stops. Oh, hear that? Crossbills. Might be able to get them in there. There we are. Yeah, crossbills. Quite a distinctive sound that they have. And of course they like to hang around almost literally in the tops of these conifers. Hear that? Here they come. Yeah, crossbills. A lot of birds make that sort of chip 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 noise, but that's quite distinctive. And usually in flocks. It's quite unusual to see them by themselves. Well, that's almost at the end. Back into the spruce plantations, which feels really claustrophobic after having so much space all day. Yeah, it feels a bit weird coming back into all this again. Not my favourite place. I mean, spruce, Sitka spruce, it's a beautiful tree, you know, where you see it where it's supposed to be, and where you see them Where I work at B. Craig's Country Park in West Lothian, we've got spruce trees that are getting on to 100 years old now. And they're not all densely packed like this, of course. They were ornamental. And so they've grown big and there's lots of space in between them and some light coming in. And they're beautiful trees and it's a really beautiful forest. But this sort of stuff, it's a bit like Galloway Forest Park, which is impressive. Just the scale of the place down there is, it's impressive how much forest there is, how many trees there are, how wild it is. But it doesn't do it for me, I'm afraid. Spruce, densely packed like this, and lodgepole, and nah. So not the best way to end, but almost at the end, and that's the important thing, because my feet are starting to hurt. That's it. Oh man. Ah, done. Kind of. Well, what an incredible walk. I'm not going to say anything else. I've said everything already. I think it's been quite clear how I feel about all this place and how it's made me feel, and I don't think I need to say any more. So all I need to do now is actually walk back to Forsinard, which is about another 80 minutes, I think. Maybe an hour and a half, I'm not sure, about 80 minutes. But you don't have to do that. You can stay here and I'll do the walking and you can go off. And well, you got your feet up, haven't you? You're nice and warm at home. I've got to walk up the road on tarmac for another 5 kilometres, 6 kilometres. Anyway, see you the next time.